Is it too late? The topic of climate change has been growing in popularity over the last decade, but that leads to the question, is it too late for a change? If people begin to act on their claims to put global warming to an end, society can stop the damage that is currently happening before adding to the permanent effects. It is vital that governments, especially from financially sound countries, can support these countries who are struggling as climate change worsens. A new financial layout must be created to ensure that these countries are getting enough support from various areas. Article written by Tracy Carty and Lindsay Walsh opens their paper by quickly calling out the financial impacts of climate change. The paper immediately calls out how many countries must be held responsible due to their efforts of funding UN humanitarian aspects, such as events that have happened due to extreme weather. We can see on this picture that just because we do not see it, it does not mean that it's not happening. Many animals in Antarctica, like these polar bears, are beginning to lose their homes due to the impact of humans. These contributions should come to those who are directly impacting those who are causing the large amount of greenhouse gas emissions. These people include, but are not limited to, government officials and famous political figures. This relates to the thesis because it shows how we need to work as one. In the later claims, it explains how this can happen in more detail, but from a broad perspective, we need everyone's help to stop this. With the help from those who are financially stable, third world countries can get the economic support they need, which ultimately leads to the lack of climate change. Based on research done by Lucas Chancel, it examines how the bottom 50% of the global population contributes to 12% of total emissions, in comparison to the top percent of the global population contributes to 48% of the emitted greenhouse gases. All of this data was collected from 2019. Lucas Chancel describes in great detail that those who are the richest are more likely to overconsume. This leads to more trash being filled in the landfill and a rise in greenhouse gas emissions. Those in poor areas of the world only can create a small fraction of the emissions of greenhouse gases due to the fact that many people have to create all of their aspects of living to survive. This means that they are not sure where their next meal is coming from, or even if they have clean drinking water. There is no doubt that many of the richest people contribute to waste and global emissions. However, there is a way for that to be changed. Since many of those people view climate change as, quote-unquote, it does not apply to me mentality, there is one way for that to change. For those people, to reduce their waste, they need to donate those third world countries or to help organizations who put that money to good use. Claim 3 is a call to action. Many larger cities have admitted to their contribution of hurting the environment and their lack of efforts to stop climate change. Claim 3 comes from author Helmut Phillips Ost, who created the article that describes how major cities are at fault for their major impacts of global warming. To break down the scholarly paper, there is still hope that we can change our ways as a society. Since cities, especially large cities such as New York, Los Angeles, and Paris, contribute to a vast majority of climate change, a call to action was very overdue. Many city officials often put off climate change because people truly believe not only is it not important, but it is not real. It is vital for politicians and other government officials to grasp the true impacts of what is happening to the world around them. The fourth claim calls out how much of our population comes from things we don't even think twice about. Authors Catherine Bradford, Leslie Abrams, Miriam Heglin, and Kelly Kilma came out with a scholarly article that explains that we can pollute Earth in ways that we did not know were possible. This article dives into how harmful chemicals called PFAS end up in rivers and streams. They tested this by going to different spots on the river, and the results showed that waters in military bases and sewage treatment plants hold much responsibility for this pollution. Due to this testing, we as a society now have a call to action. Since we found our source, well, out of many sources, we know what steps that need to be taken in order to slow down these impacts. Since PFAS are extremely harmful chemicals that are often found in non-stick, water-resistant, and heat-resistant products, we can learn what to avoid not only for our health, but the health of our environment. Based on the research above, many people believe that people that hold power over cities and government waited until it was too late to help the environment. With that, to completely grasp the damage that has been done, we must acknowledge that irreversible acts. However, we can still serve as motivation in attempts to do better. This process cannot be done with one person alone. To look more in depth, I looked at what Pittsburgh has planned in order to control their climate change. If you were to open the City of Pittsburgh's website, it shows how they are already beginning to experience many aspects of global warming, such as harsher climates in the winter and summer. This means that the winters are much colder and the summers are much hotter. They came out with an action plan to slow down these changes. In this plan, it can be summarized as the following. In the 3.0 plan, there are 6 key aspects that Pittsburgh plans to focus to help slow down the impacts of climate change. There are energy generation and distribution, building and energy efficiency, transportation and land use, waste and resource recovery, food and agriculture, and lastly, urban ecosystems. By 2030, the City of Pittsburgh plans to have a lot of goals. To start, they plan to have 100% of renewable energy in its city facilities. They also plan to have 100% energy and water use reduction in the city facilities. They plan to operate a fossil fuel-free fleet and divestment of the city pension fund from fossil fuels. They plan to have 50% transportation emissions reduced citywide, and lastly have a zero waste policy citywide. Climate change due to global warming is impacting farmers in western Pennsylvania.
Farming in western Pennsylvania certainly has its challenges, from the steep slopes of the field to the diseases that can harm the crops. But the biggest challenge farmers face is the weather.
In my opinion, western Pennsylvania grows some of the best tasting vegetables in the world. And it's all about the weather and the soil.
But if there's one word to describe the weather here in western PA,
unpredictable.
And that can pose challenges for our local agriculture.
Especially now with the weather we've had and all the rain and everything, is making it very difficult to kind of get going. It's been too wet and too cold.
Local farmers say the changes in our climate haven't gone unnoticed.
We've had more extremes in weather, I think, in the last 10 years than we had previously.
They say earlier warm-ups in spring followed by later than normal cold snaps, as well as too much rain, have been hurting crops in the early stages of growth.
So when the temperature warms up and they kind of wake up and then it drops again, they're a little more sensitive to the cold temperatures. The problem is once things start to go, they don't really stop.
Due to extreme change in the weather over the last 10 years, farmer Art King, who was the co-owner of Harvest King Farms, which is only a 30-minute drive from Duquesne University, explained on CBS how their crops are not what they used to be. Climate change is playing a huge role in this. Since winters are becoming shorter and take longer to kick in, this leads to a pushback in the spring, which negatively impacts how the farms can plant their produce. Additionally, the extreme rain that has been occurring has been hurting crops in the early aspects of their lives, as they cannot survive in the uncertain weather. Next, while there are many steps Pittsburgh plans to take to slow down the impacts of climate control, it leads to the question if they're actually acting on them or continuing just to talk about them. The short answer is yes and no. While these large projects are currently being worked on, all of the citizens are being told to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Additionally, there has been a large push for the citizens of Pittsburgh not to drive and are being asked to walk or take the city bus. However, there is much more action that needs to be made. Overall, climate change can seem overwhelming. Many people think that one person cannot make a difference. Though some acts are irreversible, there is still hope. Sources by Tracy Cardy and Lindsay Walsh explain that though we may not see climate change, it is destroying our world, starting at the most vulnerable. As described in the second source by Chancel, it shows how low-class and high-class gas emissions compare to one another. The third source is summarized as, if financially supported countries help the third world countries, it can quickly slow down the damaging effects. Lastly, as the fourth source acts as a summary to tie up all the research. By taking note of what the authors have done and stated above, and by educating ourselves and others, it can be a start to this change. This literature review is to serve as a call to action to the change that needs to be done and can start small. It can be small things like remembering to reduce, reuse, and recycle. It can be as impactful as starting organizations in your local community. Any step to stop climate change is a step in the right direction. All in all, there needs to be a change. How will you help create that change?